Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin. I'm here with my co-hosts, Sheikh Amr Saeed and Sim. And today, calling in from beautiful, sunny Southern California is Karim Serageldin, the founder and the president of Noor Human Consulting. Karim has a BA in Psychology and Religion and a Master's in East-West Psychology with specialization in spiritual counseling. He's a certified life and relationship coach with years of teaching and consulting experience. So, Karim, first of all, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you coming on this afternoon. We're getting snowed in here, but I'm not going to hold that against you since you live in probably the high life down in SoCal. You don't have snow there, I assume, right?
Actually, Bay Area, and, we pay for it, so...
Hey, at least you have options. I mean, Noor Consulting must be a pretty profitable gig, I take it then. You know, seven-figure income probably.
It's doing all right, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, first thing I noticed was you said your name is Serageldin, but then it's spelled like Serageldin. Like, let me guess, you're Afghani, right? Bay Area?
No, but very good educated guess.
Talk to us a little bit about your family background then, just so our listeners can get an idea.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Massachusetts. My parents were born and raised in Cairo. But we are basically Turkish, Arab, and Egyptian mix.
That was my guess.
That was Sim's guess.
I thought Sheikh Amr got that.
No, Sim got that. I agree with him because I agree with whatever he says.
It's the spelling. You have to look at the spelling, and you know exactly where people's nationalities are.
Right.
That's what happens when I grew up in Ohio and not only exposed to like white folks. Anyways, how'd you get into this line of work? This is an up and coming field in the Muslim community, right? But you're probably, I'm guessing, our age. You probably grew up in a time when the only options you had were doctor and engineer, and you decided to do this route. So what's up with that?
Well, yeah, I decided to be a professional martyr, as I like to put it, and alhamdulillah. Nowadays it's becoming almost, it's becoming more popular, or Muslim communities are becoming more aware of the field, and I'm just like, yes, thank you, finally, alhamdulillah. I've been kind of on this island for the last 20 years. But, to be frank, I actually knew I wanted to go into the field of psychology since age 16. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. There wasn't any of this like, well, I failed out of engineering school, so I'll just be a psychologist, I knew from early age I was, very fascinated by people, cultures. I grew up in very diverse communities. Obviously, my parents being immigrants, and I grew up in a neighborhood where there were a lot of other immigrant families. I went to Roman Catholic school in Boston for several years, and then I ended up living in a very conservative Jewish town for most of my life in Massachusetts. Shout out to my Sharonite brothers and sisters. And so I've always kind of been very fascinated by multiculturalism and religion and human sciences. So alhamdulillah, that's what I've always been kind of drawn to, and I've been dedicated to learning and enhancing myself in those departments ever since.
All right, very good. Now, you've got a couple of specialties that I want to talk to you about. Now, one thing that we were talking a little before the show, spiritual psychology, like what exactly is going on there? Like, what does that mean? Like, explain to our listeners, because that seems like a very vague term, right? When you hear it, and just, it's hard to like really put our head around it.
Absolutely. So spiritual psychology, also known as transpersonal psychology, essentially it's basically the cross-section of the study of the self, the mental processes of the human being, emotions, behaviors, etc., but also keeping in mind that there is a spiritual dimension to the human condition, which isn't necessarily present in a lot of modern models of psychology and the approach to the human condition, which I think is one of the concerns when you do have, mashallah, like more Muslims going into the field. They're actually being indoctrinated by many concepts and principles about the human condition, which if you look closely to them, they contradict some of the values of, for example, the Quranic worldview, right? So my whole thing has been, well, let's make sure that psyche is not removed out of psychology, because psyche in ancient Greek actually means soul and self. In fact, it has many of the same meanings as nafs does in Arabic.
Okay, so like, does that, I'm trying to, again, wrap my head around this concept. How does that work practically speaking? Like, okay, I want to give you an example, right? Let's walk through this example. This is a real life example that happened at work. Water cooler talk, kind of. I'll bring to the podcast. So I've got this coworker, right? Young kid, he's like, early 20s, and been with us about a year or so, and he has a reputation of being a player. Like messing around with girls all the time, but he's Asian. He's from an Asian background.
When you say Asian, you mean like Indian?
East Asian, like Chinese. Okay. Chinese, right? And, did a whole, said, and I remember I remember when I first hired him, I was like, I asked him, like, we were at lunch, and I asked him, like, very frankly about, like, how it is to be a player, like, just the whole mindset. Mm-hmm. And, he explains to me all this stuff, and I was like, yeah, but you're Asian, and you only mess with, like, white girls. And, like, I thought white girls aren't into Asian guys. Like, yeah, but I'm, like, confident, and, like, I played football in high school. And okay. So then I find out that, no, this is all made up. He made this stuff all up. Because I found his buddy from high school works with us, too, and spilled the beans. And it all kind of jived up because found out he's pretty much lying. And this is actually not his first coworker I've had, like, completely make up a story about his entire life, his background, just to, like, kind of fit in. So... And when I think about that, I'm like, this guy's got a lot of insecurities. There's probably some immigrant issues happening because he comes from the very, a lot of Asian families, even if they're not religious, they're very conservative, right? Mm-hmm. And he's, dealing with that and trying to fit in to suburban culture, suburban high school, etc. And, trying to come off this image because that's the cool thing to do. And one thing, my epiphany was like, alhamdulillah for Islam, because, when we were growing up, and I'm sure Sim and Sheikh Amr can talk about it as well, like, even if we went to public high schools, we could easily say, yeah, we don't mess with girls because we're Muslim, Yeah.
Right.
And people never, like, took that as a negative thing. They're like, okay, that's something you guys just don't do. Whereas if a non-religious dude says that, like, I don't mess with girls, man, you're a loser, man, you're gay, this or that, you got issues, you ain't got no game, all this other stuff, and that's probably what's a contributing factor to this guy, kind of making up this image that he's just to try to, come across as like,
not be a loser, basically.
Yeah, basically, right.
People, yeah.
So when you were talking, that example kind of just hit my head, and I was just like, maybe that's kind of what you're talking about, but is it really, like, just maybe an example would be a good way for us to kind of like delve into the subject a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a very simple way to understand, transpersonal spiritual psychology is exactly what you said. In other words, you have an extra layer of meaning and resources and guidance for the human experience. So as soon as you take religion and spirituality out of the picture, that's no longer a technology that you can access anymore, right? And when that happens, I think what happens is you fall now into what I call the horizontal plane of existence. In other words, your whole life's meaning and what you're pursuing and how you're going to find fulfillment and the standards you're living up to, i.e., being a player is cool and hitting the highest part of a social hierarchy that you happen to be a part of is basically all you focus on. It takes away from exactly what the term transpersonal means, which means beyond your personhood, right? Beyond yourself. So it actually enhances the radius of which you interpret and make meaning of your own existence and, of course, the world. And if you have, of course, religion and spirituality in your life, you recognize that there is more to your reality than just the material or horizontal causations or effects, if you will. So this individual that you're speaking about, I mean, he's doing something that is, quite natural, right? Because we're social creatures. In high school, work, all of these are basically social structures where for the first time the human being can actually start to navigate their sense of existence and value in the world. And so if I grew up in a high school where being cool meant being a player and doing drugs and, hooking up with as many women as possible, then that might be something that I, go towards because that is the meaning that has been established by the social structure. And people who don't fall into some of these groups or, tribes, if you will, they're the ones that are considered alienated or outside, right, of what is considered a society in high school. So I think, high school is definitely one of the first places where any individual really kind of tests their sense of value and the predictability of their future survival in the world, because high school is kind of a microcosm for the greater society that we live in.
What's this horizontal plane that you were talking about? Because it seemed like you were talking about the horizontal plane is something that after you strip Islam and all the other concepts from you or from the self, the horizontal plane is basically the core being of you, if I'm understanding it correctly. Try to explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, is what I'm trying to say.
So if we use kind of the analogy of, the horizontal plane is basically when you consider life to be only what you see in front of you, right? So in other words, if I have anxiety about, money, my anxiety comes from the fact that I'm thinking, man, the bills are too high and I'm not getting paid enough, or I'm not going to get that raise, or what if I don't get a job out of college? And all the anxiety comes from just thinking about the horizontal mechanisms or processes, right? In other words, I get money because I have to get a job, which is true. But as mu'mineen, for example, we have the vertical and the internal, right? Vertical is iman, and recognizing that there is a source that controls and generates every atom in the universe, and that this is a source that we also harness when we need material things, not just the material procedures, but also the metaphysical procedures as well. So when you take that out, now you really believe that everything in the world comes to you because of the world, rather than recognizing the world is a means for the creator of the world.
SubhanAllah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so, and that, you brought up an amazing point, working with the reality in front of you, and that's something that we need to, every one of us have to work on in terms of dealing with everyday anxieties and pressures, and when you look at the reality that's ahead of you or right in front of you, and instead of worrying about, the ifs and, well, what if I lose my job, or what if, and making decisions based on these what ifs, that causes so many problems that can damage your life.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you're talking about, just to add on to that, I think what gave the prophet's prophethood, one of the characteristics within Ibrahim alayhi salam that gave him the title Hanif, is he was able to see things for what they are.
Right.
That's a very, very difficult thing us as human beings to have dealt with ever since humans were born, seeing things for what they actually are, because you can avoid lots of things, lots of psychiatric issues, lots of spiritual issues and the soul and everything and all of the above, if you can see things for what they are.
And I was having this conversation with my daughter recently. I was trying to explain to her, we can say that, we can say, look at things for what they really are.
Yeah.
But if you're not a truthful person,
you're right.
You're not going to ever see the thing for what it really is. For what it really is, it's not going to be, the truth will not be apparent to you, because you're so used to deceiving yourself.
Yeah. And it's an elementary concept that we're taught not to lie. The reason why we're not taught to lie in Islam is because you'll eventually, that domino effect of you won't even know what's real and what's not eventually.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, don't forget Allah, or else he'll in turn make you forget yourself, right? And a lot of that has to do with not truthful. I mean, it seems very simple, just a simple lie, but that tells you something about the self, right? The self is used to hiding things, and then that becomes a manifestation, right?
I was just wanted to add to that. It's so fascinating that, the example, for example, of being honest, that it's actually not easy to be dishonest. Like, it takes a lot of practice and skills to be able to lie through your teeth and keep a straight face and not have your heart rate go up and, your body temperature rise, right? And subhanAllah, this is like a divine mechanism that when we are going against the sacred, there's actual, built-in mechanisms that don't respond so well. You see, and this goes back to the concepts that we have, like fitra, right? The natural disposition that we believe in, the human being good and inclined towards what is sacred and good and true and beautiful. And so I kind of, my geeky way of terming this is T of AR, the true perception of actual reality, because there's two parts to that, right?
I'm sorry, you got cut off. Can you say the acronym one more time, please?
Yes,
yeah.
TP of AR.
TP
True
of AR.
perception
Okay.
of actual reality. So, because there's two parts, right, to at least from a psychological standpoint, is, okay, my perceptive frameworks, which is how I make meaning of existence in the world, are they true, right, or are they deluded in and of themselves? Because if that's the case, then it's going to be very difficult for me to extract, truth or meaning or beauty. And then there's of actual reality, because reality is also relative to my perceptive frameworks. So you need to have both, right? Understand what actual reality is, which is what I think, sacred teachings offer humankind, at least from, a religious standpoint. And then true perception, which goes back to being honest and sincere within your own subjective, processes of making meaning of the world. And the kind of one example that I would love to always share from the Quran is, it's so fascinating to me how, you have people that the Anbiya basically gave them miracles and showed them things, that was so clear that they were trustworthy and honest people with their claim of prophecy. And there were still people who perceived it and said, no, that's magic, or that's false, or I don't buy it, right? And it just goes to show you the power of the mind and the power of how the human being makes meaning of his existence. And that's really one of the spaces I'm very fascinated by, because in the end of the day, it always comes down to how we make meaning of things, how we interpret, what's our intentions. That's how you can get groups that, do horrible, horrendous things, and they read from the same religious text, and you get people who don't do those things at all, but they're also drawing meaning and values from the same religious text.
Yeah, and just to summarize that for the listeners is that, if you don't understand the reality correctly, you're making all the decisions based on a false reality. I always talk about, this binge watching culture where we, watch shows after shows through Netflix, and we're having a generation being raised based off of false data, stuff that's not real, and they're going to be making decisions based on scenarios that they've seen in movies and TV shows, because they haven't gone out and met with real human beings and haven't had real world interactions. These are real problems that are that will manifest if they haven't already. We're probably seeing some of the birth pangs of this type of behavior and this type of culture that we're kind of cultivating here.
Yeah, Karim,
Totally.
I'd like to get again to tie it back to practicality. Obviously we're not talking about names here, but when your clients come to you with issues in the context of spiritual psychology, like what are like the top 2 or 3 issues that are they kids? Are they like parents dealing with their kids who have identity crises and stuff? What's really going on the ground floor here?
I mean, there's a lot of things, but just to share 3, I think number 1 is there's a general lack of literacy in the Islamic tradition, right? And what I mean by that is, it's not like, people don't pray or go to the mosque and listen to lectures and watch stuff. But I feel like, if you're not able to extract values and principles that are relevant to your life, then, what exactly is the point? So, for example, may Allah forgive us all and guide us all, because we all have our challenges. But, simple example, it's like, a family contacts me and they're really struggling with some of their, children. Our children are smoking weed and they got girlfriends and we don't know what to do. We don't know what went wrong. And I'm asking some follow-up questions. Okay, so what's the story? Are they in college? Are they at home? Oh, they're at home. They're not even in school. Okay, are they working? Yes, they're working. Okay, where are they working? They're working in the family business. Okay, what's the family business? We sell alcohol.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, subhanAllah. I mean, to me, it's very common. It's common sense. It's very clear. It's like, where's the barakah? But for some Muslims out there, and these are Muslims that are still, they love Allah and His Messenger, to the degree that they do, and Allah knows best. They are involved with the communities and so on and so forth. But there are cases, for example, like this, and it's just like, okay, so sometimes you got to go back to the foundations.
Hasn't the boat sailed with those type of people who contact you and tell you about, like, their kids straying off the the good path,
Yeah,
basically.
because the kid's like 20 years old, like 21, right?
Yeah, I
He's not
mean,
even-
what kind of repair are you going to do now? Even as a counselor or as a mentor or whatever role they want you to be for this child's life, what kind of repair can be done at that point?
Well, there can always be possibility for transformation, right? We know this. If there wasn't, then really there's no point to most of the kind of psychological themes in our deen. So I don't necessarily think it's, the ship has sailed, but it's definitely very far away from the dock, and it's going to take time for it to come back to the dock and get back on land and get grounded again, But there are other cases where similarly, you may have younger people who had a very difficult time being aligned to sacred values or the Islamic tradition. But alhamdulillah, of course, with hidayah from Allah and some sincerity, they were able to kind of realign their lives with, what really matters, if you will.
Karim, have you met with a lot of younger kids from immigrant background parents who've had difficulty in terms of having their parents kind of relate to some of the problems that they're having? I know when I was growing up in this country, I had a lot of those kind of issues when I had difficulty, whether it was socially or what have you. My dad wanted to understand what I'm going through, or he wanted to send me to a therapist, and I was just an angry rock and roll rebel, and I just wanted to rebel against everything. And he wanted to send me to a counselor, but he never understood that my relationship with that counselor would never understand that I'm a Muslim and I have these struggles that I'm battling with my religion as well as social pressures, So how do those three dynamics come into play? You have immigrant parents who don't really understand how you're being raised up. Then you have the Western culture that's really pushing you in one direction, and then you don't have anyone else to talk to about it. But then now there's groups like you, like Noor Consulting in the Bay Area. Over here in Chicago, we have the Khalil Center. How are you handling those type of patients?
Well, yes, it is a common pattern. I think when any family or set of parents come from another country, they are carrying with them, values and traditions, which help construct their identity. And when they come to a new society, there is a level of threat there, right, for self-preservation. And so I like to define traditions as, it's the passing on of values and customs and beliefs and behaviors. But traditionalism is when that gets dogmatic and it becomes, closed-minded. It's like, no, this is the only way you're ever going to do things. And sometimes that causes even more of a rift with the children, because they feel that they have to follow this package of customs and values, which they see all around them as not really how things go, right, in America. So, of course, they start to feel this distance, this lack of understanding, this lack of connection with their parents. I think this also happens on the religious front because, again, many of our religious understandings and practices are kind of conflated with the cultural patterns of our country. And so we bring that kind of all in one bundled package. But like, for instance, when I get questions like parents saying, my kids don't pray, what do we do? And I always ask the parents, I never make it about the kids because it starts with the parents, right? And every mosque I go to, it's the same thing, right? We need more youth programs and the youth. I'm like, the youth are a product of you, so what are you guys doing, as adults, as the leaders? And we need to make sure that it's not always just about the youth, because the youth are just a reflection of what's happening on the adult level. What kind of community and environment are we creating at our masajid? Not to say that all of them are bad, but this is one of the reasons why youth don't go, right? Or they struggle with it. So for example, when parents say, my kids don't pray, what do I do about it? I ask the parents, I say, why do you pray? And they say, because Allah commanded it. And I said, well, why does Allah command it? Well, if he doesn't need you to pray, he doesn't need your prayer. And they don't know how to answer. They say, that's exactly what my son says. I'm like, well, that's a sign from Allah that you need to substantiate your own beliefs and practices.
SubhanAllah. Wow.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I want to move on to the other specialty that you are kind of known for that you work on is marriage. And there's a lot of issues with marriage, right? But I want to talk from the context, and we'll try to I'll let you illustrate the sister's perspective as best as possible, but I want to be straight up here from the guy's perspective. Religious brothers that we're all friends with, alhamdulillah, and whether it's me growing up in Ohio or Sheikh Amr and Sim's crew here in Chicago, all these guys, we all got into the deen. We've always avoided dating and stuff like that, and then we get into college, and I remember back in the day, it was always about. Remember college? I was like, yeah, man, I gotta get married, man. I gotta get married, And as dudes, there's only one reason you're trying to get married, because you're trying to get laid.
Yeah.
In halal context.
Halal sex.
Yeah, halal. Yeah, right. I mean, you don't know anything else about it, but you
told him he can say whatever he wants, so to get ready.
So and a lot of it is because in the reality is that and we've seen. And this happens for the sisters too. I've heard sisters they grow up watching Bollywood movies and they think their husband's gonna be like Shah Rukh Khan or some dude, some good looking guy, And as good guys, we watch random movies, but there's always random sex scenes and stuff, and it looks awesome. And then you get married and man, this is whack. this ain't how it looks like. This is how it's supposed to be. And then and then you would talk to some guys who are been married for a few years, and they're like, yeah, man, I gotta negotiate with my wife every time. It's maybe once a month. And then from the sister's perspective, it's well, my husband, he's out of shape and fat now, and he don't do no chores around the house. So I'm not attracted to him no more. And then you got this, and you got this vicious cycle here. And the husbands, because I don't know how when girls are growing up, I don't know what their mindset is towards marriage, because they're obviously agreeing they married some dude when they're 23, so they probably feel there's some incentive there. And guys, straight up, we're hey, we trying to get it on, and then when you get married, and then that last 6 months to a year, or whatever, depending on how long your honeymoon phase is, and then it just dies, and then you throw kids to the mix, and then it just, and then you got this whole social pressure from what you hear in the media, and this and that. It's in your head. Of how we should be. We were joking the other day about how there should be some kind of quota that it should be part of the prenup or something. The wife's got to put out at least twice a week, or it ain't happening. You know what I mean? And then we talk, and then we asked Mashaikh about it, well, isn't a woman supposed to submit to the husband? I'm yeah, but if you keep pushing this could be rape. I'm what? For real? I want to get out the god. This is what the brothers are saying in our community. The practicing brothers, we're complaining because...
Wait, what do you mean we, man? Speak for yourself.
Well, Sheikh Amr's got it on lock, alhamdulillah. But 95% of the rest of us, we got issues, man. How do we tackle this? What's going on here?
Quite the venting that was.
My wife does not listen to our podcast for the most part.
What exactly do you want to tackle? A more frequent, satisfying sexual life?
Yes, exactly. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, but before we do that, I think, let's talk about the prevention, right? Preventive measures. What's happening often is what I call microwavable marriages, right? It heats up fast, but it cools down very quick. And basically, many of us, like you said, men and women, we have unhealthy and immature narratives about what marriage is, what love is, and we create these, unrealistic expectations, and of course our suffering and letdown is proportionate to those unrealistic expectations. And I hear this from both sides, right? But here's a nice analogy. When men want to get married, they want a garden which they can go and put some seeds into, right? And once they get married, they're like, woohoo, I've got this, blank patch of awesome soil. They're beautiful, they're fair-skinned, they're whatever, the checklist that my parents made sure I followed was fulfilled, and here's my patch. And then we go and when we put the seed in, and then we keep coming back and we're wondering why it's all just soil. Is something that has to be nurtured. Love is not something you find, ladies and gentlemen. There is no love corner or object, Love is something you have to grow. And so you need to water it. It needs sunlight. It needs
an action.
proper care. You see, it's not some magical, sparkling formula that just like, well, where is it now? Like, what happened? Oh, I guess I'm not in love anymore. Let's get a divorce, or let's start emotionally cheating with the guy or the secretary at the office. And eventually, oh, brothers, oh, I'm just going to get another wife, man. That's going to solve everything, right? Even though you don't even know how to handle one, right? So what's going on? And that's exactly where I try to come in, is we don't know basic things about gender psychology. You know, what are the top needs of men and women, you know, generally speaking, right? There's a bell curve. So these are the things I ask people, you know, when they're like, oh, I'm ready to get married. And it's like, okay, what are the top needs of women? I don't know. So how are you ready to get married? Because getting ready to have sex is not the same thing as getting ready to be married. In fact, we all know, us married brothers, that having sex is an extremely small percentage of most of the hours you put into a family, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I always say we spend a ton of money and energy planning the wedding party and how we're going to show off to our communities. You know, not everybody, but I'm again talking about the unhealthy themes. But we don't spend a dime in the actual relationship.
A lot of guys will actually say that sex is actually just a biological trap built into men to get married or to be with women, or else they would never want to be around women in general. Is that is that something that you hear often, or?
Well, I mean, I definitely believe, and so one of the things I offer clients is this model of healthy masculinity and the yin and yang, you know, bringing back the yin and yang in marriages. And I believe that the feminine powers is a beautiful phenomenon, and there's a lot of wonderful traits there. And perhaps it's one of the reasons why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you know, there are three things of this world that's so beloved to him. What are they, gentlemen?
Scent, honey, and woman. Right?
I think sajda, seeing people in sajda besides the honey, but yes, women, right? And so what did he mean by that, right? And we know that it's not just, because women are beautiful creatures that we're attracted to, but it's also because of the qualities that they have as beings, which is very beautiful, because they do represent a lot of powerful themes and kind of the gift of life that we also recognize in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim are the dominant names of God. He could have, you know, used different names at the beginning of the surahs of the Quran, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to use Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. There's no Bismillah Al-Karim Al-Majid, right? And so there's something to it, right? Raham and womb. You know, there's a connection there to this idea of the feminine power is the life-giving force. It's a nurturing force. It's the egg, you know, of families, and families are the cells of society. And what's sad is today, you know, a lot of women feel like if they are just a housewife or a mother, that this is just, you know, there's no value, right? And modern society kind of craps on this. And it's really disappointing, because I sometimes, when sisters call me for some advice or something, I'm like, so what do you do, sister? You know, how do you serve the world? She's like, oh, I'm just a house mom, or I'm just a mother. I'm like, don't say that, you know, have integrity. And, you know, you are very honorable, you know, don't look at it as like you're pathetic because you're just, you know, you're not working full time. Right. And so, you know, I think that we just have a lot of skewed ideas about what it means to be, you know, a man and a woman today. And this, as Muslims, it's even more sophisticated because we've got all the kind of postmodern constructs surrounding us in Western society, and then we have the very Eastern, you know, values and customs, which some of them are valuable and healthy and good, and some of them are not. So we're kind of dealing with all of these different influences, which I think a lot of people are just come down to it. They're just confused on what it means to be whatever, you know, a man and a woman. And we know that nowadays it's like, you know, we're even taught, when I was studying psychology, it's like, okay, your sex is, you know, biological, but your gender role is something that you can just choose and make up and decide later, right? And it can be totally contrary to your physiological makeup. So we're just living in an age where all these things are no longer clear. And I think that, like any of us, we Muslims, we always go to these nice schools for the most part. We try to, you know, go to the best of the best, and we don't realize we're going to be indoctrinated by many of these concepts and values, whether we like it or not. And if we've never had good talks with our parents or guidance around, you know, what it means to be in a marriage, what does it mean to, understand male and female psychology. It's just, Bismillah, they're a doctor, they come from our country, they speak our language, and go ahead, let's throw a nice party and make it happen, and good luck.
Now, I have a theory, and I know, you being a psychologist, that we try to peel back, psychologists try to peel back what is the underlying cause for behaviors, right? And my theory is that we have so many problems in marriage because of a culture of selfishness that is developing all over the world. It's not just in the West. I want to say the West, but it's not just the West. Yeah. It is around the whole, is engulfing the whole world that, worry about me and my needs first, and then I'll worry about you.
I mean, narcissism, basically.
Yeah. Let me take care of my plate first, and then I'll take care of you. Before I share my food with you, I want to make sure I have enough to fill my belly. So I think that kind of attitude is permeating marriages too. Let me have let's just be blunt about it. Let me have my orgasm first before I take care of your emotional needs,
right.
Wife, right? So don't you think some of these underlying social problems are kind of permeating our marriages?
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's so many variables going on, and definitely, when you grow up in the West, it's very individualistic, and that's not always a bad thing. But of course, an extreme of that does develop these very selfish, narcissistical, like I'm automatically the queen or I'm the king, and my love is conditional, right? Once you do everything I want, then I'll start doing what you want. And that's not really marriage or a healthy marriage, right? That's selfishness disguised in partnership. And so one of the things a practical technique I try to share with couples is, okay, why don't let's practice being, having, I call it selfish selflessness. Selfish selflessness. And the equation is simple. If I prioritize my wife's needs and try to fulfill them, naturally she will reciprocate mine. And this, of course, works when two people genuinely love each other. They're sincere and they really wish well for one another, which is one of the meanings of, wadda, right? Al-wadud. And so this idea is, if I really want to, do what my wife's needs are or what she requires to be fulfilled, I trust that naturally she will also fulfill my needs. You see? So this is how you create that self-generating yin and yang. But the first step is we need to understand who we are, what's our nature, and what's our personality temperament, and of course our partners. And then that's where the real kind of work comes, is how do we actually manifest this mutual exchange that's fulfilling. Because a lot of people, when they want to get married, I'm like, okay, brother, what do I'm like, what are you looking for? Like, oh, I want all these things, right? And I'm like, well, what do you have to offer? By the way, what are you even bringing to the table, right? Yeah. And many people don't think about the other side. Like, they're just looking for, how is this person going to be utilized for my own needs and my own fulfillment, rather than also thinking about, what do I have to actually give?
Yeah, just to recap on that, on the hadith, because it's still ringing in my ears, about Rasulullah, the three things that he loved the most, because they have a certain type of reflection of our insides. When he said tib, things that smell good, and an-nisa, women, and he said qurrat ayni fi salah, right? And the coolness of my eyes is in prayer, right? Every single one of these, if you have a love for them in a certain way, reflects your insides. Like, I mean, you could even expound upon this far better than any of us can. As psychologically, why does somebody if somebody always wants to smell good, what's embedded within them that causes them to do that, right? It's actually, in Islam, it's considered a spiritual thing, right? Mm-hmm. That somebody, they always want to smell good. And Rasulullah, as we know, that a lot of his income, he used to spend on scent more than his own clothing, And then as far as women, the perspective that you gave was awesome, because somebody who is an enemy of Islam, if they think, oh, he loved women, then they'll take that discussion in a certain direction. But if you look at it as your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that goes in a completely different direction, right? The way we want it to go, obviously. And then he equated all of that, or he brought up in the same hadith, that as prayer, like the coolness of my eyes is in prayer. So he's talking about everything that's satisfactory. Yet, if you have a certain direction with these things, it shows the reflection of the inside of the individual, right? I mean, we're not judging anybody. But if you know somebody that's known to not really ever smell pleasant, rather, let's say you're praying next to somebody and they smell unpleasant, not only does your mind start wandering away from your prayer, you start kind of thinking about the person when you're supposed to be concentrating on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Smelling good actually brings khushu' towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what I'm saying? So I thought it was very interesting. Somebody who specialized in psychology and family just threw that in there. I think that was phenomenal, man.
Just to tie things back, what you last said, having that open, honest conversation with yourself and trying to understand, who you are and why you're having problems within your marriage. It takes that honesty that we were talking about earlier in the podcast. When you're looking at the reality of things around you, you have to be an honest individual in order to even have that honest conversation with yourself, because there's a lot of people who say that they're having an honest conversation when they're not. They're just looking at all their strong points and ignoring all their weaknesses that they need to work on. So that was an interesting point that you mentioned just now.
It was, man. It was.
There's one thing that by the way, I gotta give a disclaimer here, just because I'm ranting about it. Like, me and my friends have very frank conversations. I don't want anyone to get the impression that this is my own personal, beef with my wife or anything like that.
Of course.
But so I just want to throw it out there.
No,
but as guys, we definitely talk about this stuff.
Yeah, and if there's sisters listening, this is what happens when you always want to hear guys and what happens when we're kind of talking behind closed doors. We're letting you know these are the conversations that happen.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily ideas or beliefs that we hold, but in order to have the discussions that we have on the Mad Mamluks, and you can't hear this in other places, is having open dialogue and letting everyone in on what's happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, and just also for this, to let the sisters know, a majority of people that I know and ourselves, if we ever discuss stuff, we don't talk about personal things, what happens in the bedroom, because Rasulullah, he prohibited us from talking about those things. So we have to also, even though some brothers or sisters, for that fact, may be venting, we always refrain from talking about personal, specific issues about what happens with our spouses, because that's completely un-Islamic. We don't do that. But generally speaking about things to get, consultations from your brothers, that's fine, But even in that, Islam asks us to be noble in that situation.
It probably would benefit us. I think Sister Summer's one of our hosts, and maybe we can have a show with her and maybe someone from a female perspective as a guest, talking about that, because that way we just cover all the bases. I think,
of course,
because certainly there's expectations. Like, as guys, we're very when I talk to my friends, it's like some of us, it depends on who you are. Some of us get used to it. Like Sim alluded to, we're selfish in the sense that, we just want to get off. And sometimes we only need that once a week or once every 2 weeks. And so it only takes 10 minutes, so if that. So, we're able to ignore our duties for 2 weeks. Oh, snaps, I gotta get off. And then done, back to being 2 weeks of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Or not contributing to the relationship. And one thing I will highlight, that maybe we can talk a little bit about more. There's this concept called the love tank theory, or it's like having a gas tank.
Yeah.
Marriage is you always want to be in a black. You don't want to be in a red. And, and a lot of that it's investing into the relationship. And I will get, and we don't talk about personal stuff in a negative way. I want to give you a personal example. Alhamdulillah, that my wife, I think, got a lot of brownie points for me. So inshallah, we're going for Umrah, inshallah, right? And my wife, for those of you guys don't know me, is a gynecologist. She makes the bank in the house. I'm just along for the ride. I'm just kind of there. But I make a good living too, alhamdulillah. But gynecologist, physician.
You don't got to explain. We know
they make a lot more than engineers, right? So inshallah, we're going for Umrah, right? Inshallah, we're going in a couple of weeks, and my dad hits me up. He's like, "Hey, can your mom come with you?" And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, "Oh, can you pay for it too?" I was like, I'm broke. And so I asked my wife, "Listen, my mom wants to come. What do you think?" She's like, "Yeah, she can come." was like, yeah, but and she's like, and my wife ended up paying for my mom's package, right? And to me, honestly, I was thinking like, if I was going on vacation, like just to be real, like I would not want my mother-in-law to be there, like you know what I mean? And I definitely like, because Umrah is like a family kind of getaway too. It's not a vacation, but I really would, if I had the power, like if let's say if I was an investment banker, making crazy amounts of dough, and we were gonna go on vacation, my wife's like, can we take my mom with us? I'd probably like not be like too happy, like
you'd be enthused about it.
I'd try to talk her out of it, to be honest. Like I would be like, yeah, and I'm not really down with that. But my wife was like, yeah, she can come, like no hesitation. And I was like, dang. That means, talk a little bit about this. I don't know, Karim. You don't talk about.
What did you mean by the dang? Because I wanted just some clarification.
Dang, it was kind of like,
you're not like that.
I'm happy that my mom is coming with me for sure. Like, alhamdulillah,
but you wouldn't have been like that if she asked about her mom.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know that like myself, I'd be like, yeah, man, it's gonna be a drag. Having my mother-in-law with me is not gonna be. It's gonna be a drag, this and that, and yada yada yada. And like in-laws are we all love our in-laws, right? But at the end of the day, there's like there's the in-laws or outlaws concept, and I.
So how does this tie back into your love tank theory though?
She is invested in love. So for me,
she's investing into the love tank, and you're not. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So like I'm like, dang, I gotta like, but the reciprocating effect has been like I've. Like, since she's agreed, I've been very conscious of that.
Oh, okay.
And I it's forced me to like...
It's helping you up your tank game.
Yes, exactly. Like, okay. I'm using premium gasoline instead of like that 1987 brand. You know what I mean?
One of the problems I have, Brother Karim, I have 4 kids, and sometimes being affectionate around my wife is embarrassing. My kids get to kind of feel uncomfortable, being if I go in for a hug or anything, they're not they're regular kids, and they're not like we're not a super conservative family like Sheikh Hamir here, but
I'm not conservative either.
But how do you be affectionate and put into that love tank when your kids around, and there's family around, and sometimes some of us share family within one household.
Why do you guys think it's a problem to be affectionate in many of our cultures? Like, why is that a bad thing? It's definitely not in the Sunnah.
Right.
The Prophet ﷺ was very affectionate and made contact with the Sahaba, played with Al-Hasan al-Hussein and other children. So why are we saying, well, we just can't do that? Why do you guys think that we're held back?
Well, I think if you're a kid, you think it's gross that your parents are doing that stuff.
No, I think it may be that way. I think a lot of it has to do with the ultra conservative upbringing of not being fully transparent with children. I personally think, when we're affectionate with our spouses, our kids, they see that and they see the love. Like anytime, even just I give my wife a hug in front of my daughter, she smiles, she likes it. Because she sees that communication. Obviously, for my, our parents' generation, without mentioning specific examples, that was a really weird thing because they never really, and I think it leads back to not being able to talk to them about anything really, because we never got any talks, which is fine. May Allah reward them for the monstrous amount of work they did for us, coming to this country. But we never really got any talks. It was known as the S word, and you never really talked to even them about marriage. If you did, it was super uptight and uncomfortable, and that relationship shouldn't be uncomfortable.
Oh man,
and I never, I found out everything either in school through friends. I never really had an opportunity, but that's just the way that generation was, which is totally fine. But I think it became very weird. But with our kids' generation, it's based on their upbringing, right? If they see their parents affectionate, and it brings more love into the family,
right? But some of my friends have told me that their wives, because they grew up in that conservative environment, they never got that talk, and as a result, they became like prudes, right? I mean, just to be blunt about it, they don't like doing certain things, and like they're. I mean, guy was telling me one time like how.
Get ready, Karim.
Yeah, a guy was telling me one time how his wife, how one of the main ways that a girl will get off is oral sex, like vaginal stimulation, right, via the mouth, and she's never down for that, And that's something you like would read about. Like Kama Sutra will probably tell you the basics of that, right? Or even like he would tell me, his coworkers would tell me that's how you do it, man. And he's like, no, man, she's not down for it because that's like considered something weird and gross because of her upbringing. Like, and so I definitely think that. And that's not just one person telling me that. I mean, I hear that a lot.
Guys, I'd like to announce the destruction of Mad Mamluks from today.
And then but as
associated with me now.
But as a result, like the sister's not getting her, climax, right? And now she's like, well, this stuff is boring. Why do I want to do it? Like it's a chore. Now it becomes a chore for her and she's too prude. She's too much of a prude to like, experiment a little bit. I'm sure there's more to it, but that's how the guys are seeing. That's how a lot of guys are seeing it too.
Akramakum Allah. Yeah, I mean, I can relate. I remember once I was, giving a seminar on relationships, and there were questions at the end, and one brother, I didn't get to him. He had his hand up in the back, sitting next to his wife, and, the time was up. And then he came up to me after alone, and he's like, yeah, brother, I had a question, but you didn't get to call on me because the time was up, but I wanted to ask, why doesn't my wife give me blowjobs?
Wow. Oh, wow.
All right, Karim, like, you went up to him, Karim.
Thank God you didn't ask that in front of everybody and your wife sitting next to you. And B, his whole thing was like, is it haram and this and that? And we got into the discussion, and I was like, listen, it's not about an Islamic, it's not about finding your legal fiqhi justification here, right? And this is a sad thing that some brothers do is like, they play the Islam card, right? Oh, it's your obligation and you have to do this and you got to put out and you got to do what I want because, I'm not even supposed to be monogamous anyways, whatever it is.
Monogamous anyways.
So it's like, just look at, for example, let's go back to the top needs of research, and even with over 100 couples that I've worked with, very frequently you find with men, it's sexuality, respect, and admiration. Those are at the top. And for women, it's affection and care and openness and honesty, you see. So when women feel emotionally validated through affection and care and loving gestures, they will naturally be more inclined to, inshallah, explore more of the physical things that men want. And when men feel the emotional connection through their women of being respected and admired, they will also naturally want to perform and do things that please their women physically. And of course, everyone's different, right? I mean, if you grew up in America and let's say you had a history with pornography or you've even had relationships, your frame of reference and standard for what is considered, healthy sexuality or good sexuality is going to be very different from a girl who grew up and you're the first man she's ever seen or touched or thought about in that way. And so we got to be real here with the variation in our actual sexual education and backgrounds. And sometimes our sexual education is very unhealthy, right? Like we believe our wives are supposed to be porn stars, right? And it's like we also got to get real about that. And there are some women that are actually very flexible and open to exploring, but it's the men that are, very selfish. They're like, thank you, I got what I wanted, and now I'm going to go make a sandwich and watch, Mad Mamluks on YouTube. So it's like, we both have responsibility in understanding our sexuality and what pleases our partners and how to, keep things spicy and healthy. And I mean, I love to use the example of, subhanAllah, isn't it true? Umar ibn al-Khattab went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of God, I entered my wife from the back. I think I'm doomed. I'm destroyed." Right? Yeah. And the Prophet ﷺ, clarified. He said, was it from the anal or the vaginal canal? And he said, it's the vaginal. So he said, okay, you're good. But that was something Umar went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said. Yeah. Would we ever go to Imam and go, yo, last night, I had some, I entered my wife from the back and I'm worried about that, or I tried some new position that seems weird and I don't know if it's halal, or I want to explore oral sex, but I don't know if it's halal. Most of us would never go to a imam and even talk about that stuff. But the Sahaba went to the Prophet and asked questions about that, asked questions about sexuality. We know the man who loved zina. He went to the Messenger of Allah. He's like, man, I love, banging chicks. Like, that's my thing. But I also want to be, Muslim. So what do I do? And the Prophet ﷺ wasn't like, you are disgusting and how dare you, and I'm the Messenger of Allah and how do you bring this up? And no, he was an educator, he was a counselor, and he connected on that human level. Yeah. And we know that man walked away saying, I haven't seen a better teacher than the Prophet, And I went in loving zina more than anything else, and I walked away hating it more than anything else.
Exactly.
So the point is we don't have dialogue about sexuality. Sexuality is mentioned in the Quran, right? Enter your wives like they're a tilth for you, you know. And what's interesting when you know the context here, it's like if a sister who, you know, has some, you know, feminist slants might look at this verse and go, oh, this is so sexist and blah, blah. It's like, well, do you know, asbab al-nuzul, like what are the reasons why this verse was mentioned? And when actually you learn about it, it's not unhealthy at all. In fact, it's to address the superstitions of the tribes, the Ansar and the Qurayshis, that believed that certain sexual positions meant that it would deform your children, or, you know, you're more likely to have a boy if you do this or you don't do that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was clearing the air and being like, hey, you guys go through the whole Kama Sutra, no problem. It's not going to affect the health of your children or what color eyes they're going to have, you know. So we're missing this, you know, in our, I think, our spaces. And I mean, I would love to get to a point where I could have like a class for men to like men to really, you know, do their best to learn about female psychology, how to please them sexually. I mean, a real like course on how to do that, and vice versa for women, right? It's like women learning about all those things and what does it mean to be attractive and so on and so forth. And of course, every couple is different. And I'm saying I have all the answers, but I definitely have some of them. And I think that if we get started with just kind of general knowledge and literacy about gender needs and relationships and sexuality, then mashallah, you know, like we're going to be able to create healthier experiences within the home.
I hope you do like start a course, because you're a good looking dude. I take a class with you. Because I think there's another class, like one of our former guests.
What, you're going to make a decision about making a class based on his looks?
Judging a book by a cover?
Exactly. Like, you know, there's like a garment with Sheikh Yasser Qadi. Sheikh Yasser and I've known him for like over 10 years. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not learning sex from Sheikh Yasser Qadi. Come on, bro. Like, that's not happening. Like, you know, he's an Akida guy. Like, hadith.
It's a really good a platform that he has on that. Like a
garment?
Yeah. I mean, the videos even, they're very good videos. But anyway, go ahead, Sim. You were going to say something.
No, Brother Karim, you made an amazing point that, you know, the elephant in the room is porn, and the expectations that we're having for our partners based on porn is problematic, you know, unrealistic expectations that we have, and that's just a whole nother problem that we're trying to tackle in our communities. And it seems like, you know, problem after problem, but how do you address that there's so many layers of these, you know, selfishness and porn and all these other problems that are kind of leading into or permeating into our marriages? How do we tackle all these different layers?
Well, I mean, you got to start step by step, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do is address every case, you know, based on its context. But, you know, to put a shout out there to my brothers and sisters at Purify Your Gaze, which is a company that I also partner with and do coaching with them. They specialize in sexual addictions for the Muslim community. And so anyone listening out there that knows somebody or is struggling themselves, it's a very common thing. It doesn't mean you're a disgusting, horrible, evil person, but there is help, and it's anonymous, and you will get, you know, customizable support through the modules and through the coaching. So Purify Your Gaze is in my opinion, a real solution that we have access to today. And it's something that really tries to address just this problem. And addictions in general, of course, because all addictions are the same as far as, you know, the stages or the cycles, whether it's pornography, you know, food, alcohol, drugs, etc. There's usually a deeper wound, emotional wound or void that's trying to be fulfilled to some level. And, you know, the reason why we are addicted to anything is because we want to numb ourselves from our actual lives. We want to escape the pain of our actual lives and find a place of pleasure. So what's interesting is with brothers, for example, and their sisters too, by the way, who struggle with sexual addiction. But for example, with brothers, it's like if they approach their wives and they feel let down, or, you know, they're not interested, or they're too tired, or whatever it is, you know, and this isn't to blame the sisters. I mean, being a mom and raising kids is, is one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and we can't forget that, right? So it's not like she was at home all day and all she should have been doing was taking a bath in milk and doing her nails for you. It's like she's got tons of things to do for everybody and still be ready for you, right? So we got to have more compassion and patience for our wives and help them find their own self-care. But going back to the pornography, many men, when they don't feel sexually satisfied, they justify using pornography instead, right? They're like, well, it's better than zina. You basically create an unrealistic frame of reference for sexual expectations and sexual pleasure. And so when you go to try the real thing with your wife, depending on who she is or your husband, you're most likely going to be let down in some situations because pornography is unrealistic. And it's designed to just be about lust and impulsive pleasure and immediate satisfaction. It doesn't necessarily have the aspect of the human emotional connection, which is what you need for real sex, right? Or real making love. Making love, in my opinion, has spiritual and emotional layers to it besides the physical. The physical is just a key to get to that deeper essence of what is it about having sex, right? Because I see sex as a gift of, not use the word creation in the sense of it is a creative force or energy. And so that creative force or energy is a beautiful thing. And many of us are taught that you're not supposed to like it. And it's actually a gift that we give. And your sexual charge, like if you're a single brother or you're a married brother or woman, and you see someone you're very attracted to out in public, that you feel this heightened charge in your body. But we're the ones that, we transfer that into some mental fantasy, or it gets locked into our, groin area, and now we're just like obsessed with the sex part. But instead, one recommendation I would offer everybody is think about when you feel sexually attracted to somebody, look at it as this is a heightened energy or charge that you're feeling in your body. And it doesn't have to be released only through a sexual medium, but that's actually a creative force or power that Allah has put in the human being, and you can actually, through breathing, redirect it and give it away as a gift. And so some brothers, for example, when they really, don't fall into those temptations like watching pornography, we guide them to take that gift and give it away in a different way. Like that is energy that we know can be transferred from another form, because we know, energy can't be created or destroyed. So just transfer it. And we don't have to necessarily just transfer it into something haram or watching pornography. So some of these brothers, when they watch pornography, they basically are using it because they didn't feel that connection with their wives or satisfied, but they don't realize that the more you watch pornography as a crutch for when that happens, the less likely you will find that connection with your wife again anyways. And that's a big problem. And it's basically the deep, hole that many people in that journey find themselves in. And
one of the leading causes, I think, to erectile dysfunction too, right? And when
right,
you're with your partner,
you're basically numb yourself, and you need crazier and more hardcore content, because it's like any other drug, right? The dosage that you used to take no longer gives you the same high. Yeah. And when you watch pornography, we know this, like the brain goes through similar activities as taking a drug. There's the dopamine rush, and of course, if you're masturbating and orgasming, you're actually associating this extremely wonderful natural feeling with something that is on your screen rather than the human being you chose to spend the rest of your life with.
Right. I'm glad Sim had the guts to like bring that elephant into the room. Because that's, a lot of times guys will be like, man, I want to, I saw something in a movie or something and I want to get it on and get down and dirty on the kitchen table and break a bunch of expensive china. That's like, that becomes your thing. Like, and you're surprised, like, oh my, and then you're like shocked that your wife doesn't want to like break all this expensive china. I was like, well, yeah, duh. If you actually think about it logically, like, yeah, why would you want to do that? But in the movies, yeah, because they got budget for that, to break dishes and all this other stuff. As we wrap up, Kareem, like normally I always ask, like on a subject like this, I would ask the guest to like give me your takeaways. But what I'm gonna do here today is I'm gonna like tell you what I think we should be doing, from the guy's perspective. And then you tell me if I'm off base or not. So number one, we talked about the love tank, investing into the relationship, like doing things for your spouse. So I definitely think that's something that we should always be, like the selflessness that you're talking about. And it reminded me of something I read from I think Sheikh Abdul Hayy Al-Arifi. I think he was a scholar from the subcontinent, a contemporary of Maulana Ashraf Ali Tanvi. He talked about how in his entire life, married life, he was, he never really had expectations from his wife. He always was in a giving mood. And that also like led to her, reciprocating that back. And I think the example that I had with my wife and my mom for the Umrah trip, etc., kind of touched upon that. Also, it reminded me a little bit about the other takeaway was like spiritual development. We had Sheikh Rami and Sur on the show several months back, and he says that one of the prerequisites that he has for anyone who comes to him for marriage, premarital counseling is, a course on spirituality and purification of the heart. Sorry, because and I think a lot of that ties back to that, because if you are working on purifying yourself spiritually through tazkiyah to nafs and training the soul, you're not gonna be like you're gonna be like lowering the gaze, which as a result cuts off you looking at other women and then fantasizing about other women, etc. And that that dilemma amongst other things. So those are the two things I think people should take. Brothers who are having issues with marriage should take away. Work on your soul, get right with Allah, and number two, start like doing, understand what makes your wife tick. A lot of women, I think it's service acts. It's acts of service. It's going out and making sure the house is clean and stuff. Making sure that your bed sheets are done, etc. Because guys, we could probably we'll get down and dirty in a dumpster, but women want they want everything to be they want something to be spotless because that's what they're thinking about, and then they're not going to get off if they've got some other headache that they're worried about, like the bed sheets are dirty, etc. Am I off base here? That's kind of my takeaway from this whole conversation.
Well, it's very important not to generalize, but at the same time we have to, because there are general themes, right? So are all women and men the same with their needs and how you're going to approach them? No. But there's definitely a foundational framework that I think everyone should be, if they're planning to get married or they are married. And that's one of the things that I try to do, with my clients is actually teach them those things, right? So like discussing gender roles and that the fact that there's 100 differences in just how the male and female brain is wired, right? Many of us don't know this. So it's like, if you knew that, you'll be able to understand the masculine and the feminine languages more precisely. And it's like any other science or art, it's a skill that you develop, right? There's a science and an art to marriage, just like there is to the deen. And so I think that, regardless who you are out there and how much even Islamic knowledge you have, you got to actually get back to the human sciences, because this is something that in our community, unfortunately, I always say, like, okay, so we're the religion for all people and all times, but, we're our masters in human sciences and social sciences. We don't have as many as we used to, historically speaking. Other groups and communities are actually on the forefront of human science. And when other people are, they're going to be defining the axioms and the frameworks that all of us will be indoctrinated by when we go to school. You follow? Right. So this is important because we can't act ignorantly anymore. We can't ignore these concepts and skills which are necessary for healthy human relationships. You follow? And so that's my whole thing. And there's a lot to share about that, and I would love to come back sometime and maybe, have, very specific things to offer. But the first thing, I would leave everybody with is, learn more about what your husband and wife's needs are. There's questionnaires online. You're more than welcome to get in touch with me. I'm actually in national practice. I do see people in office here in California, but I do video and phone consultations all over the country. So if you're in Chicago and that's something you feel would be useful, no problem. Like, we can make that happen. So I think that just learning the essential knowledge and skills through human scientists, people that have experience in relationships, is very important. And the example I'll leave you with is, God bless our, imams and religious leaders, but if you have, for example, a woman who goes to an imam and says, hey, my husband's like a real jerk and sometimes he gets aggressive with me. And usually, the response is, oh, well, tell him that the best of you are those who are best to your wives, right? And that's wonderful. That's a wonderful jewel. But when you go home and you tell your husband that, it's not really going to practically change anything. So people like myself and other professional helpers in this regard, they actually try to create a process, a realistic and practical process for how to live that concept, you see. And that's sometimes the difference. The disconnect is we have a lot of wonderful concepts, but we actually don't know how to make them into real action items and experiences. And that's where human science comes in.
All right, Jazakallah khair, Karim, for coming on. We definitely will take you up on that offer. We'll have you on. I think there's a lot of material that we can cover with you, and
I think today was like kind of an outline of what we can talk to about Karim in the future.
Do you have a sister at Noor that maybe could come on as a guest as well? Because I know we talked about we definitely talked about the guy's point of view from on marriage, and we do have we have a sister's host as well. Do you have a sister that could come on and to talk from that point of view as well, talking about this kind of the issues we talked about, just so we understand that perspective? I think it'll help us tie it all together.
Yeah, usually the email after the episode airs is, where's a female perspective, and rightfully so. So if you have anything like that, we would definitely...
Absolutely, I would love to look into it. I mean, I think it would be really interesting as my own wife, but because it's funny, because every time we go somewhere and do something, everyone always goes up to her and is like, so, especially the sister, so what is it like being married to him? Does he actually do everything he talks about? What's it like? And blah blah blah. And it's fascinating because, of course, the woman I'm married to is going to tell you a lot about how I really practice these things, and that's really important to me. Is am I fulfilling these concepts? And I will, trying my best. But I can definitely give it some more thought. I don't know if she's pretty shy, but we'll see. But there are some sisters that come to mind who I think could definitely be helpful in that regard.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Well, Jazakallah khair, Karim, for coming on, taking the time out of your busy Saturday afternoon to watch the 49ers win another game.
That's my pleasure, guys.
I'm a Niners fan. I've just been a train wreck, so it's like 1 in 10 or something, some disaster. But I figured there's something and I guess in Chicago we're not really. I don't know if you follow the sports at all, but in Chicago we same story. The Bears are terrible, and just I think Sim's entire studio down here is Bears colors. We got a panoramic view photograph of Soldier Field, but you haven't watched the game in 2 years. You said. Because it's so bad?
No. I haven't watched football in almost 2 years. I was an insane football fan. I would want to break furniture one day when the Bears would lose. So I realized that I needed a break from this and actually do something productive with my life. So
yeah.
So I've taken a hiatus and
started the Mad Mamluks.
Well, yeah, the Bears and Niners are very similar in that the organization at the top is a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
And then when you have that situation, there's very little to look forward to. The Niners were actually really good, and then they just destroyed it because there's the ego problems and whatnot. We can do another podcast about sports analysis. Go ahead.
This is so funny because everyone who knows me, I mean, I'm not into sports at all, so just this is all just going over my head.
Most successful people aren't. That's what I ended up learning. Yeah. Hey, hang on a second. None of these successful people are into sports.
Oh, they're into it, but it's they know how to manage it very well.
Yeah,
they can restrict it to 10 seconds a day or something.
Yeah, they're not watching the NFL draft like me,
right? Or going to games and stuff. All right. So for our listeners out there, Karim, first of all, appreciate you coming on. For our listeners out there, if there's any questions or comments, and you probably will have a lot of feedback, I'm sure, after this podcast, a lot of hate mail for me, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at themadmamluks, like our Facebook page, subscribe to us on iTunes. We're also on Stitcher, and give us a 5-star rating if you haven't done so already, because that helps us out big time. For our special guest, Karim Serageldin, and my co-host, Sheikh Amir Saeed, for my co-host, Sim, I'm Mahin, signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.